getting as up close and personal as any two
not,
people can be these
not
days.
Not too close, exactly.
Right, it's like close but not too close. So, Sherri-Ann Butterfield and I, Fran Bartkowski, are here to talk this morning about a class we are teaching that we're very excited about, and it is our third round with it. It's a class on where the main story that our students are taken to is the HBO show The Wire.
For these college students, homework includes watching a TV show.
The Wire just begged for all kinds of social, political, cultural analysis.
When we were watching the show together, we both kept thinking this would be great as a class.
Sociology professor Sherri-Ann Butterfield and literature and gender studies professor Fran Bartkowski are co-teaching this 15-week course based on The Wire at Rutgers University in Newark, New Jersey.
You agree with how it gets portrayed or not, that lends itself to great levels of debate and engagement. The students find themselves caught between, well, I thought I knew what I would have done before seeing this show, and now that I see the interconnectedness of systems, I'm not sure how I would have handled this.
Bartkowski says it's possible she will teach The Wire again.
So, as you know, that there are 5 seasons to The Wire.
Right.
And so the first one really is an introduction into the Baltimore drug game. So I'm calling it and policing of it, right? And so criminality in a very concretized sense. Season 2 is about unions and the docks, which are really important for Baltimore and not so unlike New Jersey.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, that could be Port Newark.
It could be Port Newark for all we know. We're not saying it is. No one have a heart attack, but we're just saying it could be.
No, but I mean, the look of it. We have that in our world.
The third season is really looking at politics in all its forms.
And there's a mayoral election.
There's a mayoral election. It's very complicated and complex that have everything to do with both the unions and the drug trade. Yep. Season 4 is really looking at education, which becomes an urban educational environment, right? Which is very particular, very specific, and so much of it is familiar to lots of us who study urban education. And
it's middle school, high school.
And it's middle school, high school. And then season 5 is really looking at the media, which it really looks at the death of print media and the rise of electronic. And so given where we are now, I mean, we still have some forms of print, but for the most part, we ended up where they were sort of leading us.
Yeah. On that thread of watching, the technology of the time of the show, the best technology anyone has is a burner phone and a wiretap, and surveillance cameras in certain neighborhoods, in certain places. And here we are watching the show in 2020 when many cops have body cams and everybody's got a cell phone. And how does that transmission of seeing what we see make us have to rethink this time around in the course in a whole new way, I think.
When we talked about this, it feels different watching it now than in the, I think, I've seen the whole series probably 6 or 7 times at this point, at least. Much less separate episodes. And it feels different now, given where technology is now. Right. And I see scenes and I think if that was now, that wouldn't have happened, or maybe it would have, but the response would have been different, right? And so the ways in which, as you talked about earlier, in terms of watching and seeing and taking care of, people are using their cell phones to take care of one another. Right?
Yes.
People are protesting in order to take care of each other. People right outside this building, we have all Black Lives Matter. That is so we can take care of each other. And that feels different, right? And when I think about the show and I think about, they still had payphones on the street.
This is Sydney Handjerker with Handjerker Cohen in Bromberg. I'm trying to locate a Sergeant Thomas Houck in regards to a client I'm representing.
Yes. Well, that show. Yes. Like, you couldn't find a payphone, a working one, much less one at all. But the idea of how technology is used to both surveil and criminalize us, and we're also using that same technology to protect us.
And connect
with each other.
Yeah.
I connected with protests in London because I have family. So they're walking down the street same time we are, and we both have our phones on and can hear what's going on in 2 different countries at the same time. Around a Black Lives Matter protest. It's a phenomenal feeling. but we shouldn't be in this space, right?
Right.
And so using this class to really talk to our students about systemic forms of repression, to talk about state-sanctioned violence in a really troubling and complicated kind of way. You know, one of the things, the great things I love about Rutgers University Newark is how diverse our student body is, which means we also have students in there who are both, find themselves on multiple lines across the law enforcement edge, right?
Yeah.
We have students for criminal justice who want to be law enforcement.
Yeah.
God bless them. It's a complicated job right now, right?
Yeah.
And we have those who have been formerly incarcerated. And so what does it mean for that conversation to happen with those not quite polar opposites, actually, as what some people would think, but everyone also who falls in between, who've had different relationships with all forms of surveillance and watching and caring and caregiving, right? And how do you have that conversation in a way that respects the movement, because it's not a moment, it respects the movement, but also respects the complicated nature of all of these systems, right?
Yeah, and I feel like part of what it's important to offer them is how to channel their passions.
Yes,
Their
absolutely.
passions and their pains. Because this is a time where passions are stirred up, given what's going on in the country and the culture. And a lot of that passion is, you know, kind of shot through with, so to speak, shot through with pain. Pain takes you to passionate places, and then the question of how do you channel that passion into progress, into change,
Right.
into feeling like you're doing something. I mean, you've seen something, you've said something, you're doing something.
The game is rigged, but you cannot lose if you do not play.
I mean, I feel like those kind of mantras and cliches, and you know, I mean,
And all this is happening in
helping
time of
them to
COVID.
make, what?
Right?
All this time in
Yep.
COVID.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you do that in a time that is so constrained about how you channel your passion? Yeah.
When you think about just when the protest started, sort of how safe you protesting brutality, but you got to be safe. You have to be socially distant. You have to have your mask on. And those two things don't always go hand in hand.
No, and that was, you know, to someone of my age and therefore vulnerable, watching those protests was like, it was so thrilling and energizing, and I was nowhere to be seen because I was not okay for me to be out in the street in that way. And that's so mediated. And again, I got to see it. You got to be in these two virtual places, which is kind of brilliant. But yeah, it's how close are you to it? How close can you be to it to feel that you
Right.
are making a difference with what you know, with what you want to know.
But I think this is also the I'm using the word beauty in a very intentional way, beauty of the class, right? That there will be times that you are not okay, and that care isn't just about someone taking care of something. Sometimes you have to take care of you, right? These issues are hard. They're difficult in non-COVID and pre-church, you know, and so the ways in which we need to give our students, and we've done this and the other times we've taught, but I think the confluence of COVID and this moment make it a very different feeling of a class, you know, where they have to be able to embrace their uncomfortability with what we're talking about and what we're seeing, right? Because the sights and our response to the visual is just feels different. You know, people can on, you know, IG and Facebook Live and Twitter all the time, but, you know, so video feels different now.
Well, and asking
right?
them to sit and watch 60 hours. It's not the same as reading a book,
No.
but it's a lot. And it's also the way people watch screens all the time, scrolling through this requires you to kind of sit still and watch in a, you know, it's from another time, and the kind of attention it asks is of another way of being in time, and a very different screen that, you know.
And I will add the third complicating factor, right? So we have COVID, we have George Floyd and multiple others, Jacob Blake. I mean, you can talk about
The
Breonna
names.
Taylor. You can have all of those.
The names go so.
There's too many names.
There's so
Way
many
too many names. But also, we have an election coming up, right? And so when we think about The Wire and, you know, the seasons going from criminality to, you know, unions and labor, politics, school, and media.
Yep.
As those episodes play themselves out, particularly for our students, they're going to find, I think by the time they actually get to the weeks on politics, we might actually be abutting the election. It's going to be it is a stressful time. It's going to continue to be stressful, but right before, during, and after are going to be incredibly difficult for us as a nation, I would argue.
Yeah, and we have no idea what that's going to look like.
And so how do we use the tools? What kind of tools do we give the students to really help prepare them for as much as one can be prepared in these times? We weren't prepared for COVID. I mean, nobody was. And so the onus on us to really be attentive and attuned to what they're thinking and feeling through all of this is going to be critical to how they come out, not on the other side, but at the end of the term, which makes this teaching it different than 2013 and 2016 for me.
It certainly does. Yes. It's posing questions that are with us so front and center now, as inflected by now, right? And I'm just thinking back to when I was teaching in the fall of 2016 when that election happened. And it did dramatically have an impact on the last weeks of our course, the campaign, you know, sort of coming up, and then the election results, and I was teaching a class then called History, Memory, Trauma. So we were kind of ready to go toward this abyss. And this time, you know, Black Lives Matter. What will that, we know all the scenes we've been watching since May of what's happening in the streets. And I think there's a lot of fear in the culture about what we will be seeing in the streets in the coming weeks and months. Because I don't think till we know where we are in January, both in terms of COVID and the election, I would submit, it's going to be a long, hard winter. And I really feel like part of our work is to help our students somehow take what they can from this to go with that in a kind of a trove of thinking about hard and important things. A kind of trove of that. I would never call it a treasure trove, but a trove.
No, I really like that. I like that. It's a trove of things. And, you know, it's...
What can we give them to carry at this time? You know, given what we're all carrying.
And the center of this course is really critical thinking, right? And so not feeding them information, giving them enough information for them to make their own informed decisions, right? And so, you know, when terms and terminology get thrown around like domestic terrorist versus a patriot. And who gets to be what and when are things that they're going to have to come to themselves with. I mean, we can just sort of put out what's out there, but really getting them to be really informed. We need an informed citizenry in order to be social change agents, right? We need an informed citizenry. And so that's our job.
Right. And that's about how to think, given what you are being flooded with.
Absolutely.
You know? And we're all being flooded with so much more than we can carry. So what are you going to carry and how are you going to carry it, given that we're all carrying things?
Carrying and caring.
Carrying and caring.
There are multiple ways to do both. And I think, you know, folks, and if I'm not in the street, I'm not protesting, that's not necessarily the case. You know, and so really giving them a multitude of platforms and ways and spaces to verbalize their concerns on no matter what side of an aisle they find themselves, right?
Ain't no shame in holding on to grief. As long as you make room for other things too.
It's a big semester. I think that the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, ooh, it's a lot, but it's a lot, which is why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want our students to have to process a lot of this information by themselves.
Yes, and it felt like a class where you could bring all our training and discipline of our decades in our professional working teaching lives to a moment that begs us to think as hard and as clearly and as critically and as compassionately as we can. So yeah, it's, you know, I am grateful
Same here.
to you for asking me to do it again.
Yeah, no, it wasn't asked.
Do it again. Should we do it
wasn't
again? Yes, let's do it again.
Not that we don't already have crazy other responsibilities
That
but
we're doing.
Our responsibility to our students now is
Yeah.
of the utmost importance.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always happy to talk to you about the class, about anything, but this has been great to have a conversation about what brought us here, what keeps us here, and what we hope to get out of the class. So thank you, Fran.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it really sets us a mission for the semester. I mean, we've had to be short and sweet and direct and concrete, and I feel like we, have a mission, given what we just heard ourselves say.
We have a mission. We're on a mission.
We're on a mission.
We're on a
Absolutely.
mission.
And what a great mission to be on with you.
Absolutely. And can't say enough times, all Black lives matter.
All Black lives matter.
We all can't matter until Black lives matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being my partner in this.
Thank you for choosing me as your partner in this.
Always.